In this New World Aeternum War Hammer build guide, we'll be diving into the Warhammer. If you're looking for information on this weapon, we've got you covered. The first thing you need to know about the Warhammer is that it's a pure strength scaling weapon. This means any points you invest in strength will directly increase its damage with no other attributes affecting its weapon damage output. The Warhammer deals strike damage, making it especially effective against enemies weak to this damage type like the undead, which you'll encounter early on, such as the drowned. Many dungeons in the game feature these enemies, so it's a solid choice when fighting corruptions during early game or in dungeon runs. If you're playing a strength build, having a Warhammer on hand is highly recommended. Additionally, light attacks with the hammer deal 100% damage, heavy attacks do 130%, and charged heavy attacks deliver an impressive 170% weapon damage, tied with the bow for highest in the game. The pros of this weapon type are that it has strong crowd control, it has a great AoE selection, and it has high stagger potential. The downsides are it has slow attack speed, it lacks mobility, and has very limited range for such a large weapon. The Warhammer has two skill trees, Juggernaut and Crowd Crusher. Juggernaut focuses more on single target damage, while Crowd Crusher emphasizes AoE and crowd control. Let's take a look at the Juggernaut skills first, with Wrecking Ball being the first skill. Wrecking Ball is a versatile skill where you strike the ground dealing damage while knocking down your target. It also grants you grit while executing the skill, making it impossible for you to be staggered. Progressing the skill line allows you to also knock down nearby enemies by expanding its radius and gives you 20% Fortify, boosting your armor. Despite its usefulness, it does come with a long animation, something common across many Warhammer abilities, so timing is key. Mighty Gavel acts like a pseudo-execution ability when upgraded, dealing more damage to low-health targets. While it delivers significant damage, it has a long animation, so you'll need to time it carefully, and its range is shorter than expected, making it easy to miss. This is Taunt Gem compatible, taunting enemies that are hit with this ability if you have a Taunt Gem in your weapon. Progressing this skill line also allows you to deal 25% more stamina damage as well as granting you 30% haste. The Armor Breaker skill is a powerful attack that deals a 160% weapon damage and penetrates the target's armor by 35%. If you're facing heavily armored enemies, this skill helps negate some of their protection, boosting your damage output. Progressing this skill line grants you grit and inflicts enemies with 30% rend for 10 seconds, lowering their armor. Many of the passives in the Juggernaut tree focus on increasing damage or stamina damage, making them great if you're looking to deal more damage overall. However, the capstone ability, Justice for All, only affects Mighty Gavel. It grants you grit while executing the ability, increases the critical hit rate by 20%, and reduces other Warhammer skills cooldown by 10% if you land it successfully, so if you're not using that skill, it's better to skip this capstone. The Crowd Crusher tree offers some powerful abilities starting with Shockwave. This AoE skill staggers and stuns enemies, which is a huge advantage in both PvE and PvP. You can upgrade it to increase damage, and enemies caught in AoE will be weakened, dealing 10% less damage for 10 seconds, making it perfect for setting up combos or softening up enemies before more AoEs. The stun is also handy because it prevents enemies from interrupting you, so if you're following up with abilities like Great Axe's Spin to Win or other Warhammer skills, you won't be disrupted. Next is Clear Out, which is great for controlling the battlefield. While it doesn't deal much damage, it knocks enemies back, creating space when things get overwhelming. It's especially effective after you've used other abilities and want to scatter grouped up enemies. This knockback is helpful in both PvE and PvP, letting you catch your breath or breaking up a group of attackers. Pressing this skill line grants you and your allies Fortify, increasing your armor by 20% for 4 seconds, as well as granting you 30% haste for 4 seconds. Path of Destiny adds a bit of range to the Warhammer by setting out a shockwave and a lime that damages and staggers enemies when upgraded. It's useful for softening up targets from a distance, especially in PvP if you're holding off on charging in or need to catch fleeing enemies. It also works well for interrupting enemies at range, which adds flexibility to the hammer's typically close quarters playstyle. Completely progressing this ability reduces this skill's cooldown by 5% for every enemy that is hit by it. Some standout passives in this tree include Prevailing Spirit, which heals you when you hit enemies affected by a Crowd Crusher ability, and Acceleration, which reduces cooldowns when hitting debuff targets with light attacks. These are great for staying in the fight longer and cycling through your abilities faster. For PvP, Aftershock is fantastic as it slows enemies hit by your CC abilities, making it easier to control the battlefield and lock down opponents. CC is crucial in PvP, so this skill can be a game changer. What makes the Warhammer special is its exceptional crowd control more than most other weapons. The trade-off is that you have to be up close, which can be challenging, particularly in PvP, but when you can pull it off, the Warhammer is one of the best at locking down multiple enemies at once. Moving on to weapons and armor. The Great Axe, the Hatchet, and the Great Sword all pair well with the Warhammer, since they all three scale with strength. The Great Axe lets you charge in with its charge ability, then follow up with the hammer's CCs and stuns, and once enemies are crowd controlled, you can unleash AoEs with the Great Axe's abilities without worrying about interruptions, which works well in both PvE and PvP. In PvP, this combo is effective as you can charge in, use spin to win, CC the group, and then go for another spin to win. The Hatchet offers some nice utility through its Berserk ability, which buffs your damage and increases your run speed, helping to make up for the Warhammer's lack of gap closers. While Berserk doesn't directly close gaps, the speed boost helps you catch up to enemies more easily. It's not as effective as the Great Axe in that respect, but it's still quite strong. The Hatchet also has an ability that prevents death every 60 seconds, which gives you a 3-second window of survival. This is great for PvE and PvP, and it can buy you time to CC or finish off your opponent. The Great Sword, like the Great Axe, has phenomenal AoE capabilities, making it a solid choice for after enemies are stunned. Additionally, it deals both thrust and slash damage, allowing you to cover all 3 damage types between these 2 weapons, which is great for PvE. The big downside of the Warhammer is its short range, which becomes especially noticeable in PvP. In PvE, enemies often come to you, so the hammer's AoE abilities shine. But in PvP, where mobility is crucial, it can be harder to land hits without something like the Great Axe to close the distance. You'll likely want to run medium or heavy armor when using the Warhammer, since you'll be up close taking damage. If you don't stay alive, you won't be able to land your abilities. The Warhammer offers some passive buffs to defense or armor, so make use of those to improve your survivability. When looking for stats on your weapons, focus on strength, critical chance, or effects that boost damage on crits. Since back attacks are automatically crits, positioning yourself to land those will increase your damage output significantly. You can also look for weapon effects that enhance specific abilities you use, but strength and crit chance are generally the best to focus on. That wraps up our Warhammer build video. I hope you guys found something useful here, and for you PvE and PvP players out there, I hope this gave you some direction to go in. Stay tuned as we have other weapon videos. Will you be playing Warhammer at launch of New World Aeternum, or will you be playing something else? Let us know in the comments below.